lining of your stomach. Your stomach is a hollow organ, like this, and here's last night's dinner inside there. And here's some cells that form the lining of the stomach. One of the jobs of these stomach cells is to make digestive enzymes to digest up the food that you ate. But those digestive enzymes have to be exported out of the cells so they can get to the food, or I should say to be excreted or secreted out of the cells to get to that food. So the point I'm making here, sometimes cells have to export materials like digestive enzymes in this case. Come on, laser pen, why aren't you working? And so let's watch that process. So here's the material that needs to be secreted from the cell, gets packaged up inside vesicles. Those vesicles fuse with the cell's membrane, like we saw before. But this time, the contents are just going to be dumped out of the cell instead of getting trapped into the cell membrane. And there they go. And that process has a name. It's called exocytosis. Exo means exporting, cyto means cell, and I think osis means process, so the process of exporting things from the cell. And it happens by fusion of a vesicle with the plasma membrane. Now, in other instances, the cell wants to import materials, like think of nutrients. The cell has to take in proteins and sometimes carbohydrate polymers so that the cell can has something to digest and use as its own energy and building block sources. So actually first, this is a diagram I stole from your textbook, but it shows what I just showed you. There's a vesicle with material that's going to be exported from the cell. It fuses with the plasma membrane, and the material that was in the vesicle gets dumped out, and that is exocytosis. Okay, so as I was saying, sometimes the cell needs to import things. Well, to do that, it has a process called endocytosis, which is just essentially exocytosis run in reverse. The molecules that the cell wants to import come over here to the cell membrane, and then the cell membrane pinches inward. A new vesicle is formed. Some of the plasma membrane buds inward, and you get a new vesicle coming into the cell. Now, one of the major functions of endocytosis is to bring in what are called food vesicles, which are vesicles, as I said, that contain proteins and carbohydrate polymers and things that the cell is going to be using as its own food resources. That's how they get into the cell. All right, I want to go on a slight tangent subject here. Previously we talked about another way that cells can bring things through the membrane. What was that other way? Transport proteins, yes. If this is a cell's membrane, we said that cells sometimes have these things called transport proteins, which are more commonly called channel proteins. They're little proteins that form tubes in the cell membrane, and that can be used to transport substances into the cell or to move substances out of the cell. And so now we have the second method for moving things in and out of the cell, which is endocytosis or exocytosis. Here's a vesicle fusing with the cell membrane. If that's exocytosis, materials in the cell can be exported that way. Both are ways of getting stuff through in and out of the cell. Usually, this is for transport proteins are for smaller solute molecules, and endo and exocytosis are for larger solute molecules. These protein tubes, these transport proteins just aren't that big, and so maybe sodium ions, which are just one atom big, or chloride ions or potassium ions, typically just one or two atom-sized things can be moved through there, whereas this is much larger bulk transport, things like entire proteins or entire polysaccharides. are moved in and out through endocytosis or exocytosis. Yeah.
Most of those work with receptor proteins?
Do these work with receptor proteins?
Yeah, do they work in conjunction with?
Yes, yeah. When I was showing you this cartoon a second ago, let me back up here for a second. I showed the molecule was going to be imported, just sort of bouncing into the cell membrane and forming the food vesicle. In real life, thank you for pointing this out, there would actually be receptor proteins on the surface there to bind to that molecule. And then those receptor proteins alert the inside of the cell, hey, I've got a food molecule, and then the cell knows to form a vesicle at that spot. And a lot of times, actually, the receptor proteins that bound the food molecule get sucked in as part of the vesicle also. Okay, that's a good stopping point. So we've got 5 minutes left and we'll call it quits there. And I'll give you your quiz. Put your goodies away.